I learned last week, well, I thought I learned that you can set it up to record automatically, but apparently that lesson didn't carry over from one week to the next. Anyway, thank you for the reminder. Okay, so back to where we were. And all right. Okay, what we're going to do today is three things. First, I'm going to summarize what you guys wrote in the second homework assignment about the learning activities you were thinking about, the tools you were thinking of using or wanted to learn more about, and the questions that you had. That's going to provide us with suggested meeting topics for the rest of the summer, which is going to be part of your homework for this week. We'll get to that a little bit later. Okay, the second thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through my FSEM planning as an example of how it might be done. And then the third thing that we're going to do is we have three really special guests who are going to talk about a little bit about their courses, and we're going to help them figure out how to make their courses work online. So no pressure on you guys. And I'm not talking about the volunteers. I'm talking about the rest of us. We have to solve their problems for them today. Okay. All right. So moving along, he says, let's try this one. There we go. Okay. If you go to this link, whoopsie, isn't that interesting? Why didn't it work? If you go to that link, I know I can just pull it up manually. All right, let me jump out of this for a moment. And let me go to here. Can you see what I'm looking at? Can you see the second assignment, our plans? Okay, so this is what you guys put together, and this is what I reviewed and tried to summarize, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, so learning activities. These are in approximate order of frequency. Many people wanted to know about online text-based discussions, also online oral discussions. Then there was analysis of texts and arguments. Then there was data analysis. Then there was recorded lecture and lecture capture. There was different types of presentations, how to do synchronous sessions, both large groups and small groups, how to do asynchronous group work. And then there were people that were interested in games and peer review processes, workshopping, and digital storytelling. Okay, quite a range of learning activities. Okay, tools. Again, in order of frequency of mention, number 1 was Canvas, number 2 was Zoom. Not much surprise there. Number 3 was Screencast-O-Matic, which until yesterday I'd never actually seen before, and I was pretty excited by that. WordPress, Slack or Microsoft Teams, Hypothesis, MediaWiki, Padlet, digital courseware, virtual worlds. And then there were some other tools that were really questions about, I need to do this. Ways to demonstrate writing the solutions to math problems. Maybe some kind of design or illustration program, statistical software, ability to create short videos, ability to be able to record lectures, study group. And one person said, my students need to have Microsoft Office. Then we got to the questions that were equally interesting. What types of activities work best synchronously versus asynchronously? What's the right mix? How to make online activities accessible? How to use Zoom breakout rooms? How to keep students engaged? How to create community? How to design effective group assignments? How to facilitate active learning? There were more questions. I worry about not doing much live content during the spring because of inequities in online access. Effective discussion of readings, decision-making, case studies, and scenarios. We'll be looking for a platform where in real time I can observe and comment on group project development. And then last but not least, is or how is teaching, writing, speaking, and teaching, writing, teaching, speaking, and teaching research different in a fully online environment? How to lecture or how to provide content most effectively in a hybrid course. Crafting effective online listening and reading activities, tracking student insights on a whiteboard, question mark. Best ways to solve math problems by hand or demonstrate really. And then how to support the in-person elements of the class so that students who are not physically attending class can still participate. I think that's referring to the HyFlex approach, which has some unique challenges. Anyway, so these are the questions and the tools and the learning activities that you guys indicated you were interested in. We're going to take these later. I have condensed them all into some suggested topics, and then you're going to vote on which topics you want us to look at for the rest of the summer. And we'll do that. That is the homework assignment. Okay. Any questions? I'm doing way too much talking here. All right, good. Okay. Some years ago, a faculty member emailed me and asked if he sent me his lecture notes, could I create an online course for him? Melissa, don't laugh. I told him I could help him create an effective online course, but it was going to involve a lot more than just putting his lecture notes online. I never heard back from him. But times have changed. Now you guys are all interested in these kinds of things, and that's a good thing. The point here is that when you create an online version of a face-to-face course, it's not a question of moving everything online, okay? Rather, an online course is in large part a different animal. It's a different animal because it's a different modality, a different way of teaching, okay? Online tools have different pros and cons from face-to-face tools. The same activity works differently face-to-face than it does online, okay? Now, you want to reach the same learning goals, but because you're working in a different modality, you may not want to go about it in the same way as a face-to-face course. For example, suppose you teach a lecture course face-to-face. You probably don't want to simply provide lectures online, okay? There are two reasons for this. The first is that lecture works differently online. There are pros and cons compared to face-to-face lecturing. Second, there may be better ways to achieve the same goals. Okay, so what I want to do is help you guys understand what all these pros and cons are, not today, but over the course of the summer, so that you can make the best choices for your classes. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about how I've been thinking this through. Think about how you organize a face-to-face course that you've taught before. My courses tend to be based on what I call lecture notes by topic or chapter in the textbook. They're not really lecture notes. They're really a script for what I want to accomplish in one or more class meetings. Okay. Now, these notes are roughly correlated to weeks in my online course. Sorry. My mic just went out. Am I back? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So they're roughly correlated to weeks in my course outline, okay? But if it takes one more class session or one less class session for my students to master the material, I'm totally okay with that, okay? My online courses are much more strictly organized by week. That is both good and bad. It's good because everyone knows what's going to be covered what weeks. It's bad because online, it's a lot harder for me at least to be sure that my students have mastered the content before we move on to the next. And in economics, everything is sort of cumulative. It builds on, you know. So if you don't learn something early, it's not going to go away. It's just going to make things worse. Okay. Now I don't have my online course figured out yet entirely, but here's what I've been thinking about. Okay, this is an FSEM. It's an FSEM on economic inequality in the American dream. I've taught this 5 or 6 times face-to-face. This coming fall, I'm going to be teaching it entirely online. So what I did over the last 10 days is I looked at the course syllabus, I looked at my notes, and I said, how do I spend my time and how do my students spend their time in this class? Okay, so I came up with a number of activities. The first is community building. Okay, I can't overemphasize how important community building is in an online course. Online courses by their nature tend to feel isolating. You need to work really hard as the instructor in order to go against that, so that students feel connected in the same way that they would if they were in the same room at the same time. Okay, so I spent a lot of time at the beginning of the semester community building, but then I periodically give them booster shots. Okay, I actually start the community building during the summer. In the past, what I would do is send them a survey to fill out before they got to school that asked them questions about themselves, their learning styles, not the learning styles that are that have been discredited, but just how they learn and what their experiences are, and things like that. Basically, it gives me a good understanding of what my students are going to be like before they show up. Okay, and then we share that information. In the past, we did it in class during the first week, but we're going to have to do that online somehow. Okay. Another thing that I do in all of my classes online is I spend time just talking to the students, just sort of informal conversations. So I need to think of a way to do that online. I have some ideas, but I don't have the answers yet. Okay, reading. Presumably all of us ask our students to read. The second thing I do during the summer, which is right now, is I ask my students to read a book for the course before they come to campus. When I mentioned this once before to a former dean, the dean said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. They'll never do that." But guess what? They're freshmen. They don't know any better. All of my students seem to read the book in advance. And that's great because it means we can hit the ground running the first week. I'm not recommending this. I'm just saying this is what I do. Okay. We also read a lot of scholarly articles. So one of the things I'm thinking of adding is using Hypothesis, which is a web-based text annotation tool, to scaffold the reading assignments so that I can help them get through the more difficult parts of the readings. What Hypothesis does is it literally creates a sidebar where people can write questions and comments and answers and anything they want, and everyone who reads the same text sees all the commentary. Okay, so it's pretty cool. Okay. I do mini lectures to present course content. I have a list of about half a dozen things. Mostly these are things where there isn't, well, we don't use a text in the FSEM. They're things that I want to talk to them about that they can't really read about somewhere else. Okay. Next, we do formal discussions. We start off with a discussion on what's the purpose of class discussion so that they understand what's going on and how it works. I have a half a dozen class discussions. Some of these have reading to do in advance, some of them don't. I ask them to blog weekly using UMW domains, and I show them how to set that up. I want them to literally narrate the process of their learning in my course. I give them a couple of short papers to write when we have free time. These are usually 3 pages long, so it's not a huge investment of anybody's time. This year, I'm introducing a formal debate on the question of, is economic inequality a threat to American democracy? And then I wrap all of this around a research paper. And then finally, I asked them to do a final reflection. And I found that if I give them a midterm reflection, I get better final reflections so that we can make sure that everybody knows what I'm looking for. Okay, so how do I do these activities online? Or do I choose different activities to reach the same learning outcomes? We'll see. Okay, so I am done. The next part of the program is we have 3 special guests. I guess I should have turned this back on, present. Randy is going to talk about the role of lecture in his Chem 112 class. Mindy is going to talk about the role of lab in her research methods class, and Ben is going to talk about the role of close reading in his English class. So Randy, if you'd like to take a few minutes, the way we're going to do this is they're going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to help them brainstorm about ways that they might be able to do what they want to do, but using tools that are in an online course. Okay. Randy, the floor is yours.
Boy, thanks, Steve. Winning the prize is amazing. What can I say? So
not everybody won it, you know.
well, what can I'm honored. Thank you. Now, so just to provide a little bit of context, right? So it may have seemed odd, and it felt a little odd, and it may have seemed odd to people when they saw that my choice of class, right, to really hone in on during our workshop is general chemistry. Now, specifically, I mean, I'm going to be teaching General Chemistry 2 in the fall, right? But General Chemistry, what I'm looking at, would apply to both General Chemistry 1 and General Chemistry 2 fundamentally. And so for a little bit of context for everyone to kind of catch everyone up, General Chemistry, you probably get the shudders just from hearing the word. I can tell you the students certainly do. Students hear chemistry and they go, ugh. I'm not going to be good at chemistry, right? So we have to deal with that issue, but that's a student psychological issue, not about the lectures. But the point is that the class is, one, the curriculum is set by the American Chemical Society, or the ACS, right? We are an ACS certified program at UMW. So our, essentially, for lack of a better word, job is to teach fundamental concept X, fundamental concept Y, fundamental concept Z, A, B, C, etc., and so on and so forth. And so what that means is it ends up being extremely content-driven. The class is solidly 80 to 90% content with a 10 to 20% critical thinking, of course, and problem solving, right? And combining concepts and fundamental concepts together and thinking critically. Obviously, we build that. And that's one of the goals. And the reason it's so important is because general chemistry is a springboard into a whole bunch of other majors. It's one of those classes where the biology majors require it. A lot of earth and environmental science class majors, tracks, some of them require it, right? Med school requires it, dental school requires it, vet school requires it, right? Et cetera, and so on and so forth. And so what it does is that puts this pressure on the course to basically power through and get all this stuff taught to these students so that they can go wherever they want to go when they diverge and be successful because they know the fundamentals of chemistry. And they're going to be so great. They'll be able to apply those fundamental principles to whatever science they're doing, right? And so what that means is typically around the nation, general chemistry instructors, we all struggle with the same core issues. That basically we have found the primary way to get through that much content is to lecture. And so for us, the lecture is the center of the course. And so my big challenge or fear with going online, my question is, how do I accomplish what I can accomplish in lecture? Now, I teach at UMW. Okay, we know that we are not a 300 class lecture course like they would teach at UVA, right? So we can do really cool things. Like we can break up our lectures and do active learning, right? So we do, like, one of the things I do constantly to break up the monotony of listening to me talk all the time, right, is I do these like problem solving sessions where I can break the students into groups and I can be like, look, here's this problem. I'll show you one. And then I'm going to have all of us work on this. Now you're going to break into groups. So pick your group of 4, right? So look at the people around you, get together and go to it, right? And then what I do is I get to walk around while they're solving the problem. And so usually in the physical space, I can walk around. And so I can talk to each group individually and see where is their issue? Where's their hang up, right? What are they getting stuck on? And I can help them address that on an individual basis because our classes are small enough, right? So I break up that lecture component, but during the lecture and during those active learning, because I'm able to do those problem solving activities or different types of activities, not all problem solving, but problem solving is a big example. I'm able to immediately assess whether the students are learning it, just like Steve said, right? So one of the things I can do is I can get a sense for the class. Like, oh man, I didn't teach them how to convert those particular units really well. Oh man, I forgot to like mention that equation. They're all getting hung up because they can't apply one of these equations. I can fix it on the fly, on the spot. My big challenge and fear with an online model is I can record or make small lectures, if you want to call them that. And I did this when we went remote. I made these small videos about particular fundamental concepts and example problems. But the challenge is being able to adapt and answer questions on the fly or quickly on the fly can be relative, right? But in a classroom, in a lecture environment, I can read their faces. I can read their eyes. I know when they're literally going like this, right? And I can adapt. I can change what I'm doing. In an online environment, I'm not sure how to read the room. I'm not sure how to incorporate these active learning activities. I'm not sure how to keep them engaged. I don't know how to deliver a lecture style course, basically a typically lecture course in an online environment. And so that's what I struggle with.
So maybe you shouldn't be trying.
Absolutely. So
I have a couple of quick comments.
Correct. Go for it.
And then we will open it up to the floor. In fact, Sarah might want to refute everything that you've said, but we'll let her decide if she wants to do that. So my first question is, it sounds like the role of lecture is primarily to deliver content in your class?
Yes.
Okay. Do you use a textbook?
Yes. We use a textbook. So here's the problem.
Yeah. The
students, if you rely on the textbooks, the students don't learn from the textbook well. It's basically no matter what textbook you pick, it is something they struggle with. Chemistry textbooks in general are great for supplementing. They're great for going back and getting an alternative perspective on material. But when I present it, I can typically present it better.
And you're the only faculty member who feels that way about their course.
I'm sure I am. Guaranteed.
Okay. Okay. I love the problem solving that you're doing. I can see ways that you could probably do that online. I found my, Anand, are you here?
Yep, I'm here.
Um, is it fair to say, from your extensive experience, that running the small groups, the breakout groups in Zoom gets better with practice?
Oh, of course. Yeah, definitely. The
Okay.
students get better at it, and you'll get better at running it as well. And you'll get a little more adept at being able to jump into groups and jump out and check in on different ways, which is a pretty cool feature.
Because Randy, when I heard you talking, I wondered if the anxiety you were expressing was more about the jumping in and out than it was about being able to actually answer the questions. And so the more practice, say with breakout rooms, maybe it would get easier. You know, I think from my reading of the literature, I think that asking students to do problems is probably a better way of learning than, well, certainly than reading the textbook that is. What does anybody else think about this? Has anybody figured out a solution that Randy might be able to adopt? Or has anybody thought about this?
I'd like to ask Randy a question.
Of course.
So is part of your challenge in thinking through this, and it is, I do not envy you this challenge. I am one of those people who avoided chemistry at all costs, right? Is part of your challenge how to envision this working in an asynchronous way? And so you're trying to, you know, there are synchronous online ways where you can check in with students and read the virtual room, so to speak, but are you trying to envision this where students are doing some self-paced as they can fit it in with certain deadlines approach? Because that's a very different animal than what kind of synchronous tools can I use to facilitate this?
So I am an open book. I am willing to basically figure out and try whatever, anything people are suggesting. Now, I will admit, like, so I was watching the comments. So like Sarah, for instance, I know Sarah is teaching Chem 101, Chem 111 right now, right, over the summer. And so she just noted that she used the flipped classroom, which is more or less how, if I were to teach it online, I would instinctually see myself doing it. Is basically essentially flipping the classroom and doing small recorded lectures. We'll call them lectures, they're really not. They'd be short videos on a topic, right? Typically discrete, right? And then having them practice, right? How to apply those concepts in smaller group work. Now that aspect, I would love to bring more synchronicity, however you want to say that word, to the class. When we went remote in the spring out of nowhere and we were all struck by surprise, I essentially took the course totally asynchronous, other than, of course, my 1,500 Zoom office hours two people show up. And I'm like, I have 48 of you. Get in the Zoom chat room. Get in here. Like, where are you? No wonder you're getting your butts kicked. You're not coming and talking to me. So I obviously need to bring in some kind of component where I really get the students engaged. I need to bring them into the material in a way. And in online, you have to in an online environment. Like, and that's what I need to work on, if that makes sense. It's really that piece. And so I'm thinking essentially a flipped classroom would be the easiest way. That's where I lean. Do those activities through, say, Zoom or something like that. The other challenge, just to throw it out there for people, so if anybody has ideas on this, it was one of Steve's list, is that, so because chemistry is so problem-based, I need, one of my big challenges digitally is how, when I write my answer on my paper, and I show it to you, right, that looks really, like, silly. So how do we solve math problems by hand? Even in group work, like how are we expecting the students to communicate typically handwritten math problems online? I'm sure there is, but that was one of my other ones. I was just throwing that out there. that's a separate issue. But I do want to note that problem solving activity.
Could I say something? So this is Randy because, well, A, you know, I love you, but I always teach flipped. And it's, you know, everybody can say, oh, well, you teach leadership and blah, blah, blah. It's easy to teach flipped. Absolutely true. But I've been teaching the summer online leadership class for 4 years, and I'm doing it again this year. And so I'm using that to help process some of the things going into fall, you know, because I haven't taught a 15-week online course. And I, like all of you, it was, you know, it was really hard. But one of the things I found, because particularly with the summer course, they won't, when you said you set up office hours online and they won't show up, you are absolutely right. I tried that when I first started teaching the summer courses. I kept doing that. I'm like, hey guys, hanging out here, you know, never, not a single one. But they really do, and because they get to do it through Zoom now, they do like the groups. They really do like the groups. And so what I've been doing is having them, and I'm going to do this in the fall too, I have them post like a 2-minute video of themselves before class even starts. And then they all have to go through and like, you know, like each other, so they get to see each other. And I just, little questions like, what makes you happy, that kind of thing. And they love it. I mean, it's really funny, but they love it because then they do feel like they're seeing each other. And then I just assign random groups through Canvas. And I tell them that they have to talk once a week so that they process and share the information. And if you said, okay, you're in this group, you have to talk once a week, and then you have to submit, on discussion board or through your group. If you do it in Canvas, they can just talk to you. Nobody else has to see their stuff. But if you have each group submit the questions that they struggle with, then you could do a video, asynchronous, that says, hey, here are the questions for the week, guys. This will keep you, because I don't know, they love to meet with each other, that they do not like to reach out to the professor. So that's just what I found that works for me, with that kind of thing. Because, man, I'm like you, I like to see them. But they really, and I get good feedback from them at the end of the semester about that and their groups, because then they don't feel like they're by themselves.
Just to throw one more thing in, jumping off of the discussion, the watching videos issue, quizzing is definitely one thing that can help with that. And I've done that with having people read in advance. But one of the things I did in the spring with the abrupt shift with the video lectures for one of my classes is I played off of what I normally do live, where I will periodically offer an extra credit opportunity tied to class attendance. So you have to be there to get it, right? So I'm not grading your attendance, but you don't get these extra opportunities unless you're present. So I put on my, behaviorist psychologist hat, and I did variable reinforcement, where at different points throughout the video occasionally, not every video, but it averaged out to about once a week somewhere, sometimes the beginning, sometimes the middle, sometimes the end, so they couldn't predict where it was going to be. I would offer a very low stakes extra credit option. They'd be earning 1 or 2 points. So in a 500-point class, it was not making a huge impact on their grade, but it gave them something they wanted. It let me check in on who was watching the video, what they understood, what they didn't. And then when students heard from other students, oh, did you miss that? And they were always time sensitive. They had like 72 hours to email me with this response, but I wouldn't post it on Canvas till after the grades were in, and then they'd see it post and they'd be like, oh, I missed that. I'm like, well, you didn't watch the video, did you? And so that actually increased my, because I was posting them on YouTube so I could see views. It increased my views once they started realizing that. So you can get a little tricky. Yeah, and I'm guessing chemistry, like some of my classes, they need the extra credit at times.
It's amazing. It really, and the other thing that we find is sometimes is that a lot of us have found this. If you call office hours instead of a review session, just change the word. We'll have a review session from 2 to 4 on Tuesday. Everybody shows up. Boom. Yeah, I mean, it's the easiest thing.
Sure, I think mine flows well from what Randy said. So my research methods class is a 300 level class. It's usually juniors and seniors. I teach it as a 5-day-a-week class where the Monday, Wednesday, Friday is the lecture content piece, and the Tuesday, Thursday is the lab. So it's a mix of content and process in this course. And there's a fairly hard divide between that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the Tuesday, Thursday. The part that is making me anxious and moving this online is the lab piece, because it's serving multiple functions, right? It's where we do things like talk about expectations for psychology presentations, differences between paper presentations versus poster presentations. We talk about writing in APA style, but we also do skill-based things like, here's how you use Qualtrics. Oh, now you need to program an experiment in Qualtrics. You need skip patterns. Okay, let's talk about that. Okay, you learned how to use SPSS and statistics. Well, now let me give you messy data that we don't know what it's going to do, and have you learn to clean it, or move data from Qualtrics to SPSS and have it work, or merge data files and then work with their own data and analyze it, and learn how to do graphs in Excel with error bars and do a large format poster. So and along the way, critique of their project designs. They're designing their own research projects that have to be IRB approved, collect data, analyze that data, present that data. So it's all steps of the research process in small groups of about 4. And so the lab is a mix of a little bit of content, a lot of working with the content to gain those hands-on skills, and then them applying it to their projects, but also me spending a lot of time checking in with groups around their project development. So some labs will just be, okay, get in your groups, work on your IRB proposals, and then I'm floating around because we have it in the computer lab, I'm floating around the computer lab, you know, hopping into a seat, helping them edit something. When they're working on programming Qualtrics, they get stuck, and I'm like, okay, trade spaces with me. Let me look at what you've done. Okay, here's what's going on. Let's work through that. And I don't have that ability to just like physically take over their computer for a minute and demo something, because in the lab, it ends up being a lot of kind of just-in-time teaching, because there's broad things everyone in the class needs to know, but then there's more specific things to their project. And I don't make sure everyone learns every single thing about everything, because they can't. Their projects are very different. Their needs for data analysis, for selecting appropriate research materials, for recruitment messages are going to be different. So it's a lot of working with groups where they are. And so I am definitely envisioning this as a synchronous experience, whether it'll be both days a week or 1 day a week, or it'll sometimes be one, sometimes be both, I don't know yet. But it'll have to have some synchronous components. Like I can't do that with them asynchronously. But I am trying to figure out what pieces to keep, what pieces to adapt, and where I need to do something completely new. Because the skills they need are still the same, but the way they're going to develop them is going to have to be different, because the things that I've developed over 15 years teaching this course to work in a shared room where they are in a room with their group in a cluster and then I'm floating aren't going to work the same way. Even if I put them in breakout groups, there's still going to be issues around screen sharing and talking through. Screen sharing means I can see their screen, doesn't mean I can control it, which is a different animal.
I will say something real quick. You can totally control their screen using Zoom.
Okay.
Like if you were to go right now to the top box here where it says you are viewing Steve Greenlaw's screen,
Mm-hmm.
see that, and see view options right next to that,
Mm-hmm.
and you can request remote control.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jerry, because I did not know that that was an option.
Yeah, they have to say it's okay. But yeah, that's totally a thing you can do in Zoom.
Okay, that's amazing for me, because that will help tremendously when they do weird things on their computers.
Great.
I got an email about that yesterday from a department chair. They're trying to work out a system where students can essentially get remote access. It's not in place yet, but they're trying, and SPSS is one of those pieces of software that's a high priority, which my department was thrilled to hear yesterday.
Well, I will tell you, it's still a toss-up because there's a lot of implementation that has to
Yeah.
happen. Said no, that would be ready by fall. So
Yeah.
rental may still be the way that you'll need to be telling your students when we get here in the fall, but we are definitely working on that.
Yeah, we were happy to hear it's even being discussed. Mm-hmm. Oh, completely agree. Yeah.
I can say that in my classes I do well, and I have similar issues with software issues as well. And we were able to transition to the software thanks to Jerry and the IT team helping us out. The software was free because of our campus-wide license, but the issues were more on students having very little experience installing software in their computers at home. Their different operating systems, their different capacity in their computers to handle the intensity of computing power that they needed for our software. So in some cases, we had to loan them very old laptops that we had, and that is not a sustainable solution. It went mostly fine, amazingly, but it's definitely something that I can relate to on top of the other things that you mentioned. So I'm happy to also share my experience on how we at the geography department with the GIS courses handled that.
Thank you.
In response to Steve Greenlaw's comment, this is Steve Farnsworth here. The political science methods class is going to be taught by a visiting assistant professor in the fall. We usually use SPSS, but it varies from professor to professor. And so we'd be very interested in a system that does allow for remote access to statistical packages of some sort or another, because of, well, what strikes me is the likelihood that we're not going to be able to do stuff on campus with any consistency during the fall semester.
Well, yeah, my concern is even if people are able to be on campus in the fall semester, a 15-person computer lab will probably only be able to hold 2 people given the space requirements. And so there just won't be enough machines available. And we have 4 courses in the psych department that that are built around SPSS, our 2-stat, our methods course, and then our advanced seminars, which are 4 different course numbers, but they're parallel courses. So we're definitely, as a department, grappling with that. And we're all talking a lot, kind of back channel amongst ourselves about what are the necessaries versus what can we let go of. And a lot of what our students do could be done in Excel, but that's not what they've been taught, right? That's not how our courses are designed, and it's not what they're going to be expected to know if they go to grad school. And SPSS gets our students jobs knowing how to use that. So we also don't want to give it up. So yeah, we're definitely grappling with that. And that was a challenge for us in the spring that we got a lot of help with, but created a bottleneck. So we're hoping to be more proactive in our collective planning, so we at least have a clear message to give students day one.
Yeah, I'm also thinking too that even if we are on normal operations in the fall, there'll be individual students with disabilities or compromised immune systems or whatever that wouldn't be in that classroom with those students, even with social distancing. And so I think that there are a lot of advantages to some kind of system that would enable us to develop for the fall a mechanism for methods. Although I'm not the one teaching it this semester, I don't know if our visiting assistant professor is part of this conversation, but if not, I can connect you guys and we can deal with that, because this is a big problem for us too, because the statistical training is what gets our students jobs in public policy analysis and the like. So we don't want to compromise the learning opportunities if we can avoid it.
Yeah, part of it is the figuring out, I mean, I can give them homework that they go off and do, and in real time, that's how the labs often work out. I give them a 10 problem lab that would take me 15 minutes, that is in theory gonna take them an hour, that takes them 3 if they're uncomfortable with the questions being asked. So they're often having to start it in lab and then finish it outside with a lot of checking in with me. But that is going to be more challenging without being able to meet physically. And this is a class that we actually made the decision as a department to move completely online. So it's my section and Dave Stallman's 2 sections. We wanted there to be consistency for the semester across the department so that we could deal with some broader decisions. So yeah, I think that's the piece that I'm really grappling with as I re-envision this course for this new format, is how that, the checking in on where's your project, right? That kind of meeting I feel comfortable with. It's the work group sessions I think are going to be more of a challenge, as well as some of the peer critique. I got a little experience with that in my health psych seminar last spring, where I just tried some stuff and one of them worked and one of them didn't, and the students rolled with it. So I was very thankful that they were a flexible, fluid group. But I need to do more of that, because the peer critique, not just of writing, but of older posters that I've saved as we talk about what makes a good poster, of their project design ideas, so that they can see potential flaws before they start their study. That's a big piece, and I need to find ways to bring more of that in.
Any other questions or comments for Mindy? All right, well then, Ben.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to take us to a more basic level of pedagogy, I think, because I'm thinking about my English 205 class, which is our kind of an introduction to literature class. So basically all non-majors, largely it'll be first semester freshmen. And the fundamental skill, which we call close reading in our field, is basically analyzing what is actually on the page. So that means skills like not substituting preconceptions, of what you think should be on the page versus what's actually on the page. It means distinguishing between paraphrase and actual analysis. And it means being willing to look at the details of the text, not least so that we can think about not only the fact that's presented, but what we should think about that fact, the way it's presented. So these are skills that are going to lead up to making arguments about literary texts, but they're more fundamental than actually making arguments. And it's hard for some students, even though it seems like it should be obvious. It's definitely not. And typically, a lot of this would be done through in-person discussion, which allows small groups to kind of work up some confidence about what they're seeing in the text. It also means in full class discussions, I can be kind of putting out energy and asking follow-up questions, and I can be tracking what students saying, so that we can start the patterns that develop, so that we can see where we originally began. And so I guess those are kind of the big things that I'm wondering about, and that I thought I'd present to you all to see if people have ideas for taking that online.
So Ben, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but something that I've talked about with some of my colleagues in history and that I talked about in our little breakout session the other day was the idea of doing group annotations. And we talked about using Google Docs rather than Hypothesis, just because it's one fewer platform for the students to learn. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, they're pretty familiar with Google Docs from high school, and it's pretty easy to just do comment bubbles. And I've been thinking about, it's just sort of a parallel problem in my discipline of, the analysis of primary sources, breaking them into small groups and having them collectively annotate a source in Google Docs, mm-hmm. And that you can then sort of look at and maybe jump into, or maybe, do a sort of Zoom breakout session with them where you talk through what the annotations that they made, right, and the ways in which they succeeded in analysis or not, right? So that's one idea I'd thought about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Ben, how large are your classes?
22 students.
Okay.
Can I ask a more specific question that people might be more revved up about? One of the most obvious ways to replace class discussion is to use the discussion boards on Canvas. And I think there's at least one person here who's a fan of those. But I have yet to talk to a colleague who's using it in a way that goes beyond students post comments and then other students come back and do a second round of responses or something like that. I mean, that doesn't have the flow, the spontaneity of a class discussion. I've been able to get that on Slack, but I think that won't work super well with a couple dozen students all discussing at the same time. So I'm wondering, is there a way to use discussion boards that people have found that's helpful?
Yes, there is. In fact, that might be one of the future meeting topics for this summer, because there's a lot that can be said about that. But if anybody else wants to dive in here, go for it. It takes more preparation, like almost any of our assignments. It takes more preparation than it looks like from the outside, and there are things that you can do to make it work better. I don't think we have enough time for me to go through them all today, but definitely there are things that you can do.
Steve, if I can jump in for a
Sure.
second too. I've had some success in discussion boards of assigning students roles. One of the problems I had just in doing paper workshops online is you get one person or two people who say something substantial, and then a lot of kind of piggybacking on that.
Mhm.
And so I found that if I assign them either something to focus on in the close reading, or to play a particular role, say to be the advocate for the paper and talk about what works, or to be the critic and talk about the things that aren't clear, that helped them. It gave them a kind of purpose or a direction in their discussion board usage.
And Colin, I'm wondering, do you then have 18 people who are all assigned one of those two roles?
No, I broke them into smaller groups. So it's usually groups of about 4 or 5 for each, to focus on an individual paper.
Okay, and so you had different discussion boards for Shelley's paper and Michael's paper and Terry's paper.
Exactly.
Okay.
Good idea, Colin. Anybody else? One advantage of doing this asynchronously, which is sort of what we're talking about here, is you get around the access problem of students not having the bandwidth to do real-time stuff. And so that has something to be said for it. If you are convinced you can provide the right amount of supervision asynchronously, and I think that's quite possible. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you. Thank you, all three of you, for very stimulating discussion. Shannon, you're here, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, do you want to talk about what you were going to talk about?
Sure. Let me share my screen. Oh, you need to
Yeah,
enable
try
screen
again.
sharing. Share. All right, so Steve asked me if I could come up with something that would allow you all to share and kind of capture not only maybe questions that you have, but as well as resources you may want to be sharing with each other. So it still is fine tuning. I got it to functionally work. It's just not super pretty at this point. This will be on the Compelling Courses, eventually be linked to on the Compelling Courses main page. But the whole idea here is that you could come and, you know, put your name, URL. If you're submitting a resource, obviously gotta give the URL for that. And so some of the questions look a little funky because it's a form that's just trying to combine everything in one. So if you're submitting a question, you put your question there. If you're submitting a resource, you put the title. There's a lovely anti-spam question just because this is a wide open thing. So hopefully you all know 5 + 6 is 11. Take note, just in case. And category, question, or resource. And you can type additional thoughts, especially if it's a resource, maybe, hey, you know, this is how I use this, blah, blah, blah. And it will generate automatically. So if you are familiar with WordPress, there's some kind of magic automatic post making going on in the background. And there's not any post for the new categories that I've been working on yet, but in theory, when you submit something, you'll be able to go to a page and then all the questions will be listed here. There are no questions yet, as well as a separate page for resources. And then if you want to torture yourself, there'll be a long page that lists all the questions and resources combined, and you can try to guess which one is which. But I will be sharing this, and Steve will probably send it out in his next email about where you could find this. So this is a way for you all, because obviously, you know, you all have a bunch of knowledge here that we want to make sure that, you know, if you found something good, that we have a way of getting it all and saving it, and then being able to share that with each other outside just these synchronous meetings. So an ongoing resource of sorts. And so if there are other things too you think we should be collecting, let me know. We could do that. Or if there's just other things, other ways you all want to be sharing your work too, let me know.
Thanks, Shannon.
You're welcome.
All right. Now, let's see if I can find where I was. All right. Let me share that screen. Boy, that's. Zoom is being difficult here. Here we go. Okay, so here is your homework assignment. We have 11 proposed topics on this document here that I'll show you in a moment. We only have 6 weeks left until the end of July. So what I would like you to do is basically vote on which topics you'd like us to cover. Let's jump over to that page here. And then okay. The things that I've highlighted in red font are things that I know that the Refocus Online is going to talk about. That doesn't mean we can't talk about them also, but that might be a way to call out the group. Okay, so I got these from looking at the learning activities, the tools, and the questions that you guys submitted. So if you could send me your votes by Friday, we can get this set up for starting next week on Wednesday. Okay, I will send the assignment to everybody. Does anybody have any questions or anything else you want to say? All right, well then I guess we are done for the day. Thank you guys for coming, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Steve.
You bet. Hey, Randy, that mirror behind you always makes me think it's a QAnon thing.
Oh. Well,
that's
is that
better. Yeah, that's better.
All right. I'll just do like this the entire time.
Isn't QAnon the right-wing conspiracy?
Yes, it is.
Yes. I was about to say it's a conspiracy theory, right?
I think more you've got an album that went platinum.
Yeah.
Well, that would be great too.
That should track.
Didn't you know I'm secretly a super huge star? You just didn't know.
Well, you are in your house.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much. That was good. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
Good.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Catch you laters.